Welcome to the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I guess I'm a host this week, Zach Reed, and I have got with me one of my favorite people in this entire industry, Peter Howard at PA Howdy, of Twitch fame, of YouTube fame, of spreadsheet fame. Math nerds gather and scream and throw their shirts up on stage when Peter walks by. Peter, how are you doing tonight? Thank you for joining me.
Well, hello. Yeah, sure. I mean, now people keep saying that. People keep saying I'm back. No, people keep saying I'm in an industry, and I got to tell you, this industry don't send out enough checks. No, happy to see you, Zach. Really glad you could record on your birthday. So that's nice. I appreciate it, and always excited to see you. Thanks. What's up? What do you need?
Oh no, this was a great present. This is the best birthday present that I've gotten, and I want to do. And we talked a little bit pre-show, but like I want to do a series of shows, and I want to get people that I respect, that I think have a really interesting way to attack fantasy football, specifically dynasty fantasy football. And you're one of them. You're probably my most respected, analytical bent, Twitter follow friend, person that I trust with this. And I want to talk to you about how you find edges. But before I do that, have you been watching the Olympics at all? The kind of the hoopla, because the big news today is not NFL football, even in the fantasy football circles. It's not. The big news today is Simone Biles bowing out of the team gymnastics competition for mental health reasons. And I've seen kind of a combo. I've seen a pushback of, that's weak, and she left her team in the lurch, and that sort of kind of machismo that I think we should be moving away from. And I've also seen, and I will point out specifically an article by Megan Reyes, who is at Meg Reyes _ on Twitter, who wrote for the Washington Post a fantastic article pointing out that, Simone Biles being vulnerable, putting out there that she has stepped away from the Olympics, at least the team competition, is beautiful and should be celebrated. And my kind of take on this is it's interesting to juxtapose with I watch Russ Fisher does Dynasty Outhouse Thoughts on YouTube, and it's not fantasy football, it's humanity. And I've been really appreciating, because Russ is a friend of mine, but it's nice to get the human side of, your favorite fantasy football analyst. And his last episode talked about saying things without realizing that you could potentially be hurting other people. And one of the big sticking points he was talking about was mental health. And I was just watching a replay of the Olympic coverage of Biles. She came down, they were doing the vault, and she landed awkwardly on the vault and came off and said, "I don't trust myself," and left and changed up and came back and cheered her team on. And one of the commentators said, "I spoke with somebody on the team, or I spoke with one of the coaches, and they said it wasn't a physical thing. It was just the mental health side of things." Which, like, just the mental health side of things, like, that is huge. And especially in this era where we've just kind of been isolated and alone for 2 years almost, a year and a half, let's say 2 years, because it feels like it. The mental health side of things is more important than ever, but also downplaying that and kind of making it feel like she was, this is weak because it's just the mental health side of things, struck me. And to me, strength isn't being able to compartmentalize things, and power isn't being able to push things through things, to your own detriment. And vulnerability isn't weakness. Being able to say, hey, I'm hurting, or hey, she said, I don't trust myself, when she was in the air, and recognizing that you're not at a point where you can do what you need to mentally, and being able to step back, decompress, reset is such an important thing. And I think we forget it, especially on Twitter. I mean, you've been in the mean streets of Twitter, and people aren't always cordial to each other. I mean, it gets ugly out there.
Don't know what you're talking about. Well, honestly, no, I see less of that. I actually know I'm not making it anywhere because I see less of that. But I know it's really interesting. I would say normally I'm fascinated with the Olympics and I watch all of it, but I don't get a lot of TV time these days, to the point that I actually turned on my TV the other day and it turns out we have big black lines going through it. And I asked my daughter, she said, yeah, it broke the other day. And I had no idea. But no, so I'm really not up on it. I used to and usually know the athletes and all of it. I love sport. I love watching it. I just no idea about it. So I don't even know what her issues might be, or really what sport. You said it in the air, so I'm assuming like
she's a gymnast.
I'm getting to go skydiving. That's been fun. No, I guess somewhere in there. Yeah, obviously I have a lot of thoughts about all of it, like everyone. And I agree with you. And I think you said most of it, but I don't know, like, I don't want to bleed over into what my point would be here. Like, we all have opinions on what we would do, or what we should do, or what is this, or what is that. And honestly, I think why I might be different than some of my other friends that are in the mean streets of Twitter is I think that's fine. We've always done that, especially with heroes, especially with athletes. Like, we want to have opinions on them and be on team or off team. It's part of the entertainment value of it. But as we increasingly move into an era where we are all communicating to some level directly with each other, it's not that it was easy before, but it's definitely not as easy to fade the conversation around yourself. I think we are becoming increasingly aware of how we should and we have fun, and it's fine to have, like, that's weakness, or I don't agree, but I don't think it's wrong that you say it or anything, or even say it on Twitter. But we have to be, or we're getting increasingly aware that we're talking directly to people at this point in some degree, amplifies, like, and you can feel very much surrounded a lot more, especially when you're talking about mental health issues. It's not going to we're not going to figure this out overnight. Obviously, it's something we evolve into, this new era of how we communicate. But that's all going on there in that conversation as well. Like, again, talking about us on the mean streets, like, that's probably the only area I think I should maybe have a thing to say, because I don't, like, I have an opinion on her and what she should do or shouldn't do, like everyone else who has an asshole or also have an opinion. But here's the thing: if I was her, you would be a lot more impressed with me, and rightly so. Like, she is an incredibly impressive human. She got to the Olympics. Most of us are not that, which is like why we like to fascinate ourselves with these people. But I'm going to go ahead and say the fascinating human being probably is in the best position to make her decision for herself. Like, she's more impressive than us, so I'm going to say she probably made the right decision for herself. And I hope so. Outside of that, like, I enjoy the speculation, and it is mean streets of Twitter sometimes. So just maybe we're all considering that. And some of us have to consider it more than we are. And that would probably be the only thing I have to add. Like, the only other thing I can think is I have no I have lots of issues. Everyone does. But I've never been diagnosed with depression or whatnot. But I have what my mom used to call, what did she call it? A depressive personality? Or is that what I called it? And she called it something much more down to earth, like you're an asshole, something like that. I do have my moments, if you know what I mean. But having met people with actual conditions, and Russ is very open about the struggles he goes through. Stompy has been as well, former SFB champion, former former, because they're no longer. I have met them I met them in real life in my work job. And I know even with someone that honestly has had troubles, as well as everyone that's alive, you live a life, you have troubles, and have felt depressed and maybe being a little more negative inclined on myself and my life situation. It's not the same. Just, I actually understand where it comes from, because I'm from a slightly older family, and I can hear my dad saying things like, that's not how why is this suddenly a thing now? And it's the same old adage of, it was always there, we just used to break them. Either they didn't stick around, or they didn't make it to this level because there wasn't enough infrastructure to help people with that particular, or they hid it, or it was called alcoholism or cancer disease, and they just hid it. It was always there, like everything else. So having said all that crap, what I'm essentially trying to say is, as someone who has been not depressed, because that's again the condition, but has suffered a lot of similar things I associate with the word depression, but then comparing it to those who actually struggle with a mental condition, I do not know what that is like. I do not know what they go through, even though I have felt depressed and felt it probably more often than most people. It's a different thing. Other people taking it, and the other thing is, I can hear literally the older generation of my family saying, "Well, they're playing it up." Maybe some are, but maybe some are also playing up their medical conditions sometimes as well. It certainly doesn't mean we belittle those who are actually missing a leg, because someone might be exaggerating their limp. And again, it's difficult, and I really do think, again, my background is in studying history and anthropology, so my mind immediately goes to, it's not new, but it's a different rate and extent of the way communication happens right now and how connected we are. And we're evolving into it. And weirdly enough, I find myself thinking, well, the people that are, maybe negatively affecting this person who's probably made a very brave and definitely the right decision for her, because she made it. She would be the one to know. And thankfully, athletes have that autonomy, because it wasn't so long ago that Olympians wouldn't have, many of them were forced through bad situations as well, if you look at the history of those, especially in the gymnastics field. So what I would say is, I'm trying not to be too hard on those who have those older, different ideas, because you're allowed your opinion. Just all I would say is, yeah, sure, but remember, you are now shouting at the person, and I think you would know that you would speak differently to her, even if you suspected all the same things. You wouldn't shout in their face, "You're lying and you're weak." You'd be, are you okay? Are you really okay? It still wouldn't be okay, but it would be different. And just as someone that literally straddles the millennial generation, that's what I end up telling my older members of my family and friends as well. It's like, look, I get it. I know where you're coming from. I disagree, but just remember, Twitter isn't like, us having a conversation on the phone used to be, because now they read it. Now they see it. Now their family see it. Now their children, when they have them, can go back and look at what you said about them. And that's probably not what you were intending when you say that mean shit on Twitter,
Yeah, it ends up being this weird double-edged sword now, because we've got this platform. We've got the ability to normalize talking about mental health, to normalize being accepting of mental health, to normalize reaching out and asking if somebody is okay, or that sort of thing. But you've also got this odd, like, Dunning-Kruger effect, where you've got people who have
which we all suffer from in some area, because we're not experts in anything.
Exactly. And so it's these people who have no experience with depression or anxiety or whatever it is that people are going through, struggling with mentally, that come out and say something, and it either comes across as flippant or callous or damaging, and either they intended to, or sometimes they don't even mean to, but you spout off this, oh, well, just be happy. It's a state of mind. You can, and that's, that's not how this works.
A lot of what this reminds me of for our little game is, you end up saying, this guy sucks, and the hyperbole is immensely fun. It's part of the entertainment. Like, I enjoy that stuff. But then occasionally you constantly find yourself saying, not them, like, not the person. And also, like, they're NFL players, so they're more successful at something than I've ever been at anything. So it's all relative. But he also sucks. Like, And when you're not trying to communicate to an audience, you're honestly just a person on a Twitter account. You never get really faced with that. Like someone's going to hear that and they don't get that you're not talking in those contexts. And yeah, it's awkward. I mean, but we're all public figures to a certain extent now. It's great. It's wonderful. We're evolving. And again, my default is always that person's already amazing to be in the Olympics. Normally the people we have public, like they've achieved so much. And it's like, remember at the base root of it, if it was you would probably say, no matter what your opinion on it is, this is my life. Maybe she could have had a better career. Maybe she would have won. Maybe you have the best decision ever, but it's her damn life. And if this is what's best for her, I support it. That's at the core of it. And then have your opinion, have your fun. Just recognize it's her damn life. I think we all feel that way. Hey, I make my own decision, okay?
So I just made a decision that I'm going to do a roundtable show that's just kind of a just be good episode and bring a whole bunch of my friends on and talk about, talk about the like fantasy football and how to approach it and how to have fun. And because I enjoy, there are a whole bunch of people in the space and I'm bringing you back for that show. But right now we're jumping into edges and how Peter Howard, math magician, spreadsheet savant, finds his edges. And from an outsider perspective,
I'll actually take that one. I normally reject all kind of you see, spreadsheet savants are someone who find a way to work something that no one thought of because they don't know how to do it. And that fits me. Like I'm not like most people know more about how Excel works, but I've been able to figure out how to hammer that nail into the screw hole. Now take that one. Yeah, I make it work even though I'm bad at it. That's me.
So from an outsider perspective, from my perspective, analytics is kind of like voodoo. So I sit here and watch you do your
liar,
thing,
man. We all know you're an engineer. Quit it.
No, really. It's like when you bring up your spreadsheets and you start talking about how you're analyzing this. It's like watching you read hieroglyphics and you're making sense of this. And I'm like, it's an owl and some water and and the sun, and you're like, no, whoever is going to be fantastic this year. And so, like, I guess my question to you is when you start looking for edges, because I know you do, you're one of the sharpest dynasty players that I know. I'm in leagues with you, and I'm always interested to watch you work. Where do you start looking for edges that other people aren't seeing?
Well, Zach, when we're sitting in our edge bunker, we like to start with caviar and then maybe chat around the water cooler for a while. And then we begin by delving into the deep secret undercover analytics of, no, I mean, I don't know. I start my off-season research before the season ends, and it usually starts with the panic of, what do I look at again? And like, and part of it is because we were talking about this a little bit pre-show. There are some people who have already nailed perfect processes. Like if you just want one that works, I mean, frankly, Jeff just wrote one up for Dynasty League Football called How to Win at Fantasy Football Without Watching Football. And it's solid. You just take the value that the market gives you. But in terms of process of working analytics, JJ Zacharysson's got it down. Like I'm not improving on that. He has several things he looks at every offseason. He reevaluates it and how it worked well last year and how it's changed over the course of time. And then he looks for regression candidates and those who maybe outperform where they're currently being valued. I mean, it's as good as we're ever going to get for a fantasy analytics pro. That's it. But there are what you refer to as edges, and I'd like to refer to as edge finders when I come across one. There are people that are always looking for those other things. Like there are cracks in the market or cracks in value or just little things that this year might work a little differently. And there are some people that just have a keen eye for it and they do so much work, they tend to find these. And like those cracks might fill in after a season. Josh Allen's been filled in. There's no who's the next guy who's going to exponentially improve his accuracy. Like that's never happened before, and there's not now a hole where other quarterbacks can fit through. In the same way that, who's going to be the next Cam Newton is a ridiculous question. Lamar Jackson isn't the next Cam Newton. He plays very differently. He throws very differently. Robert Griffin, Cam Newton wasn't the other Robert Griffin. There are some players that fall through these cracks to success. And there are also some process questions season by season that you can find just right now, and they might fill in next year. Like the Konami code is a great example of it. I'm hearing all off season that Rich Harbaug's great expression, Konami code, basically has been filled in now, where late round quarterback was the first crack, and in the dam where there was value to fade quarterbacks, that's JJ Zacharyson, and then Rich Harbaugh and others came along and said, well, wait, what about running quarterbacks? Because they're becoming more possible. And you got Robert Griffin, you got Cam Newton, now you got Lamar Jackson. And now people are getting wiser to that. And so that crack's been paved over a little bit. And so you're looking for someone else that can find another crack. And I realized I should have chosen a different word than crack, because now it sounds like we're either talking about drugs or ass, and I can't decide which. But that's the word that occurs to me, because cracks get filled in, they get fixed over time, hopefully, if you're maintaining a wall. And that's essentially what I'm thinking about, this paved sidewalk that we're walking, and occasionally someone finds like a little extra path. And I'm trying to find those, but I don't have the mind of Rich Harbaugh or the process of JJ Zacharyson. I am just a guy who's figured out how to use Excel a little bit. So I basically cast a far and wide net. I look for anything that looks a little off, like where we're at, ADP, trade values, hype on Twitter, and what actually happened. And one of them I found consistently is good is that age is a little overrated in terms of performance, even though we get lots of the best years, year two, and from younger players. Yes, but the average age of top 12 wide receivers is 27. And that's because a lot of them were 32. Like if you're looking for production, and we're getting reasonable discounts because you're getting fewer years in Dynasty, but you are getting production still. And so that's not new, and it's certainly not something I highlighted. I was just rereading Adam Harmstead's article on mortality rates versus age curves, and it's now something I have to regularly read because he's a better writer than a thespian has the right to be. I told him that in a DM. There was a particular line I just thought was really good writing. I sent it to him, and he was like, I called him a statistician has a right to be, and he was like, I'm not a statistician. It's like, don't do me. That's my thing. And I was like, what do you want to be called then? He's like, well, I trained to be an actor for a little while. I was like, fine, thespian. So now that's what I say. He's a better writer than a thespian has a right to be. But it's a really fun article, but it is real nerdy. I have to read it several times before I understand what he's saying every time. But that I'll attribute that to him there. The age has value, or there's a discount on age because of it. Another one is this was described best for me, and I forget the guy's Twitter handle because he's an economist more than a fantasy football guy, but he plays fantasy football, and he was pointing out that the way they developed finding an edge or finding a crack in the dam for stocks, at some point stop being seeing where the market's going wrong and seeing where the market goes wrong most often. And so instead of predicting which stocks go up and go down, instead look at which stocks we bet on most often that fail. And so there's that second line of delineation. And so I started to incorporate that more and more the last two seasons. It's not who finishes top 12. It's who do we most often bet on being top 12 that fail to be top 12? And they're for no reason other than that, just that there's an edge there, fade that player. Antonio Gibson is one of those players for me this year, by the way. I think it was an exceptional. He can definitely be a top 12 running back this year. So could Kerryon Johnson when I made the same argument about him 2 years ago. But I don't think he elevates into Saquon Barkley, Christian McCaffrey, 60% of the workload guy. And so to do it, he has to do as well as he did last year and probably see the team improve around. It's just a longer shot bet than I think ADP currently takes into account. This was easier to make with Cam Akers, by the way, because you had a guy to fade him with. You just went with Darrell Henderson in round 11, which is way too low, with a guy who could have been a 30% workload guy and now is probably a 50%. Anyway, so that's a second place I start looking. And this offseason, I go back and look for those same trends. I update ADP and see once again, what did we get right? What did we get wrong? What did we bet on that we got wrong? And that's happened in a trend. And then I go looking for those players this year, essentially. For example, Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, those are usually the defaults. Those are the guys you bet on, young running backs on the come up. But then this second line of thinking had me thinking, but we get those guys wrong a lot if they've already had the workload, or if we're projecting a larger workhorse load than we necessarily can with a guy like Darrell Henderson. And we won't see how that worked out. I was actually really looking forward to Cam Akers breaking that one, because I really thought he could. But Darrell Henderson was just so late drafted. But anyway, so that's another one. And I'm running out. Like those are the ones I've been experimenting on the most. And also, variations on a theme. And I was just on a podcast. I'm going to shout out on your podcast because they mentioned you. And they're new. The Casuals FFP. It's just three guys who enjoy playing fantasy who started a podcast together. So they asked me to come on, and they were really fun to talk to. But I was trying to explain to them how the more I look at my spreadsheets, the more I realize, because I found that splits don't work, like in this section for these games. I've never really noticed it a lot, but player evaluation really revolves around that more minutia, that play-by-play data. And so I'm taking the broad signal from seasonal data, and sometimes I miss that means I'm not essentially evaluating players' performance. So while I like yards per snap and yards per team attempt and these other unexpected points, essentially what I can boil it down to is looking at that compared to these trends that I'm talking about, then looking for edges in the market, and then just preferences that I've come to develop. Another one, which is probably, if I'm known for anything, I've been talking for a really long time right now, Zach, but is people continue to fade draft capital, sometimes, quite often, ineffectually. Like not liking Darnell Mooney right now, that has only negative expected value, to put it in a nerd term. If he doesn't hit, you don't get value for that. And he's being drafted in a range that suggests his value is in a range that there's only upside, or just another wide receiver who didn't quite make a regular starter for you. So, and I think that's because of its draft capital. Same with Michael Gallup now, because last year the market tried to pay Gallup effectively, but they got scared because of his draft capital after CeeDee Lamb actually, cooked him a little bit this year. But he's still a good player. And the Cowboys didn't go away from him despite having three good wide receivers. That's actually a positive sign for Michael Gallup. Anyway, sorry, you talk now.
No, I like that. Take a drink, relax a little bit. But no,
am I sweating a little bit? I feel like I'm sweating, Zach.
You look good. No, I like this is exactly what I was hoping for. Where these are things that I don't think about. I don't go look for the trends where we've missed and try to evaluate things that people got wrong, that they continue to get wrong. Like that to me is not like I'm so much more focused on.
I got one of those if you want it. Inside the top 12, running back and wide receiver, we're as accurate. I thought we were much more accurate at wide receiver. That's what we've been rolling out and why zero running back works. Actually, in Dynasty ADP, we're about as accurate, about 4 miss in the top 12 drafted wide receivers and top 12 drafted running backs. It varies on a theme through the years. Obviously, sometimes we get 8 right, just happens. But on average, it's about the same number. Inside the top 5, we're much better at wide receiver. That's where the edge is. And also it should be, because I'm too used to pointing out the top 24 running backs aren't as valuable as everyone thinks because they're a little overdrafted. But top 24 wide receivers really aren't where it's at either. You want those top 12 guys to really make a difference. So anyway, so that was meant to be quick, but I'm shutting up.
No, and
top 5 wide receivers.
That's exactly. So you can attack. And here's the thing too, that for me, and maybe I'm wrong, because I have a lot of theories. So and we've talked about these before. So a few years ago, I jumped in your DM and I said, Peter, I think number 1 wide receivers are moving into the slot. I think slot targets are becoming more valuable. What do you think about that? And you said, I don't know. Let me get back to you. You built this entire slot rate spreadsheet that I still use religiously, and came back and said, oh, you may be onto something. And I said, well, occasionally, even a blind squirrel finds a nut. And so that's how I operate, because I don't I just have theories. I have these ideas, and one of my theories that I'm rolling with right now is everyone keeps coming out with strategies that have kind of a set limit. So and don't I don't want to put JJ Zacharyson in this basket because I think he where he said late round quarterback, I think late round kind of is able to move. So it's looking at who's gone off the board, and when you get to a certain spot, that is late round. Whether it's the third round because now people are going to
Mahomes late. It's just relative to where he normally gets taken,
right? Yeah. But I think that the issue that I have with zero RB, and I've been a proponent of zero running back in the strategy and the anti-fragility and the idea that running backs get hurt at a higher rate, and the idea that you can conceivably find later running backs who will give you more than the receivers that you can find later. I'm 100% on board with that. I think the place that a strategy like zero running back loses me is you can't take a running back in the first 6 rounds. So all of a sudden, I think you hamstring yourself where by saying I'm not going to take a running back in 6 rounds. Let's say all of a sudden you're in a league where running back goes crazy and 30 running backs go off the board in the first 4 rounds. What do you do there, or 5 rounds, or whatever? What do you do there now that you're committed to zero RB, as opposed to understanding theories and being able to pivot? And I think that's a big that to me is an edge where a lot of people come in with a comfort zone and a strategy.
Yeah, I think the strategy word is key. I got in trouble on zero RB almost immediately, by the way.
Like the minute you came
people started debating what is and isn't a zero RB, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like, I read the article, I listened to him talk. I'm a moron, but I don't see why you're enforcing this strict definition.
Yeah.
And actually, I got caught out to a point where Nathan Powell and his podcast host, we got into it on Twitter, like very friendly, like Nathan's great. And they were having a very smart debate, but they were trolling someone else for thinking something else was a zero RB draft because they took an RB in like round 3 or something. And I was like, that's still zero RB though, right? Not being privy to the cool guy conversation on Twitter. I didn't know I was walking into something. And they're like, no, it isn't. Look at the article. It's those first 5 rounds. You got to not draft running backs. I was like, what? And he came on my podcast, or I came on his, and we talked about it. And I still came away thinking the same thing. The zero RB wasn't you can't draft a running back. It was like late round QB. It's you lean wide receiver more than you would be ordinarily comfortable. And that's what I thought the data proved. But I will say that no one has mentioned that to me since basically this offseason, when Sean Siegel and everyone else in RotoViz is literally rolling out that exact interpretation of the... Because to me, that's a strategy. That's an action you take to enforce a theory. That's an action, drafting so many in this round, this round, this round. That's strategy versus theory, or a tactic versus a strategy, if you like. I think those are the correct military terms, given the 20 years I spent in the Marine. No, I have not defended any country. I apologize. But so I'm probably misusing the terms. But to me, that was the difference. Like the theory of the strategy was to lean wide receiver where wide receiver was more accurate and try and capture that anti-fragility. But if Saquon Barkley, for example, forced you in the 5th round, you don't just take a wide receiver anyway. Right. And that's now the interpretation I hear most often from Sean Siegel himself and others in RotoViz who were advocating long before. And by the way, Jacob Rickrobe and many others in high stakes best ball tournaments or even dynasty tournaments were doing that. And Sean said that himself. He was riding up a trend he had seen utilized, he was utilizing, and maybe Mugginses like us hadn't been aware of it. That was it. And so it's not like he developed research. Like, I'm not trying to take anything away from Sean, personal hero of mine, obviously. But that's what he was trying to get out, the strategy, and here's an effective way of employing tactics to get there, but not you have to. Like literally that year, the one team that was rolled out based around the proof of the pudding took a high running back. Not in the first round, but he took a running back pretty high. I forget which. I think it was Aaron Foster. Sounds like it would be Aaron Foster, but he's my favorite running back. So maybe I'm just everything's Aaron Foster or it's nothing. But anyway, and that's the way I've been trying to phrase it this offseason when it comes up. It's like a tactic of implementing the strategy would be don't draft a running back before round 6. But a strategy has to be adaptable to different circumstances. So in a draft, you can take value. It's just you're leaning away from running back a little bit more than the market or whatever we want to call it typically does.
See, and that's beautiful because I've been here. I've been awfully quiet on Twitter, but I'm always watching. You and J Mike, you've just disappeared. I just see J Mike pop up from my best ball drafts every now and again. It's like, oh, there goes that $3. Thanks, J Mike. but I'm always watching and I'm always listening, and I see a lot of pushback this year, especially. I mean, there's always pushback against zero RB because it's different and it's not the flavor of the week that everybody 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago, or actually it's like 7 years ago that Sean Siegel came out with the article, because I think it was 2013. And the only reason I know that is because I just did a parody song last week about Zero RB and Sean Siegel, and I had to have the date because it was to Smashing Pumpkins 1979, so I had to have the Sean Siegel date. But so 7 years ago, that was the rage. Everybody came in and they were like, yes, Zero RB is the way to go because the article was fresh and it was this new thing. And now we're in the pushback era. The hey, I'm not going to understand what you're saying because it's a catchy title. The nomenclature, the Zero RB,
which was meant to be what it was. It caught attention. It was easy to say, easy to understand roughly what it was saying. I mean, that is the purpose of a title. So it's almost political slogan. It's got to be quick. It's got to be memorable, and it's got to tell you what the purpose of what we're doing to try and figure out. Yeah,
but the problem with that is if you don't dig any deeper, then you're going to misinterpret the rest of the strategy for the catchy slogan, the catchy title. And
I think we're actually still missing some of the nuances of that one because we're so stuck in the discussion over is the sayings, right? It's like, I really call it bellhop. I don't care. Could we talk about like Jacob Rickroad, who I honestly know was drafting zero running back long before, is now like gets a lot of hate for saying things like running backs should be more highly valued right now, especially after one of the best zero RB years for drafters. But he has interesting points, like in best balls in underdog, where a lot of people are drafting right now, it's half point PPR, which just changed the dynamic a little bit. Yeah. Another thing that changes the dynamic is like last year was a great year for zero RB, but not really in best ball because there was not a high number of drafts where James Robinson was taken. Because you have to be able to identify these guys when you're drafting in order to capture it because it's best ball. And so work better in Dynasty, for example. But another aspect of it is, because I've been slightly reading but disagreeing with Jacob, like I think ADP builds into this. And in your individual draft, obviously the flow of it, if everyone's going zero RB, then it's literally useless. It's actually the edge to go the opposite way. And same with any strategy. If everyone's doing the same damn thing, like the edge is somewhere else. But there's this interesting, and I can't quite wrap my head around it, and this is why I want everyone to stop discussing the slogan and start discussing this so they can answer it for me.
Yes.
Like, there's this inverse relationship of ADP. Like, Jacob was saying that it was so easy to go heavy running back this year because you were getting Tyler Lockett, Juju Smith-Schuster, Cooper Kupp after drafting running backs. And I thought that makes a lot of sense. But the edge at wide receiver isn't potential top 12s, because I found all of them to be a value in Dynasty. But those top 5, again, is where my mind went to. And if you can lock in those top 5 wide receivers for the sake of fading, running back 11, 12, 13, 14, then that's a zero RB year. Because there's this inverse relationship where It's a good year to draft wide receivers because the ADP was so low like a month ago or so that it feels easy to draft 0 RB, but the edge at wide receiver is those top 5. So actually, it was a good time to go 0 RB because those top 5 wide receivers were free. You just had to get rid of the running backs and then constantly draft for their backups, obviously. Or the mid-level starters like who produce 30% top 12 weeks, like Philip Lindsay and Singletary and all the other halfbacks, like not halfbacks as in the football position, but playing barely half the role at the position, like Kareem Hunt and Darrell Henderson and so on and so forth. So like it's not a one-to-one. It's not if running backs are being drafted highly, you can go 0 RB, but it's also not if wide receivers are being drafted high, you can go heavy running back. There's this, and I don't know where the changeover is, or if I'm even right on that, because it feels to me like if wide receivers are being drafted so low, then it's a good time to go heavy running back because you can get those top 5 wide receivers later, but they have to be falling far enough. Right now, based on my drafts, the ADP is shifted again. Like I don't like my teams nearly as much as I was liking them a month ago. That's my measurement. And so I think wide receivers are getting a slightly higher ADP late.
Well, and I think we get kind of like overlap between your first
mushes together.
Yeah, like so your first point about the top end wide receivers being easier to predict. So if you've got the top end wide receivers being easier to predict and also falling because people are valuing running back higher, all of a sudden you can double tap those top end wide receivers in the first couple rounds and have this real big positional value.
Advantage.
Yeah. And
everyone gets choked up about the tight end positional advantage, but no one cares about the position where you start 3 of them. Apparently.
Right.
That doesn't matter.
And I think that gets lost too, because we were in a super flex world now. And we're in, a lot of leagues I'm in, you get flex spots and extra flex spots. And so that changes the dynamic of how you draft. And when I'm in several leagues that Russ Fisher does, and his format, his kind of default format is start 1 running back, I can't remember if it's 1 or 2 wide receivers, and then it's just flex, like whatever you want. And so that all of a sudden really lets me be flexible in a draft to how other people are drafting and being able to pivot either, because I feel a lot more comfortable drafting 0 RB. But in that particular startup that I had with Russ, it was Saquon fell to down to the bottom of the first round, and I was like, well, I'm going to get a top tier running back who has potential to be the number 1 running back, but is probably slotted somewhere between 1 and 5 at this huge value instead of what I would normally do, where I would normally take, one of those high end wide receivers and pivot away from running back. And so it's a matter of, and I feel like this is an important thing to point out. And it seems intuitive. It seems like maybe kind of like your skill level easy, but you've got to pay attention to what your league format is and what you can do with your roster construction and what you can start, because a 0 RB draft in a league that is 100 flex, that's different than a 0 RB draft when you have to start 2 running backs and you have to start 3 receivers. And
I was thinking about this a little bit the other day, where we come from a post-standard scoring world. I think that's part of the hate, why we don't want wide receivers to matter or 0 RB to be. It feels like you don't like running backs anymore, because in standard scoring, like wide receivers just chasing touchdowns. So there was like one guy that was worth it, and that's Calvin Johnson the last 5 years, and that's it. But the scoring format changes that drastically. And so does it, like, if you want to change the tight end position, start 2 of them. You won't like it, but it will drastically change the value of them. And same like you were saying about Superflex. And how many running backs versus wide receivers you start, like, So many times I started a league and only realized too late that we only started one running back. I'm like, all my defaults are wrong if I only need one running back, because that's such a drastic change. So yeah, it matters.
All right, I've got another edge question for you, and I know we exhausted your like season long, and you're looking at veteran edges. I doubt we exhausted
I think
it,
I have two more, but yeah.
All right, well, let's so give me those, and then I'm going to ask you another one because I want to.
I literally just thought of them, like remembered them, should I say, while you were talking, and one of them is remember who's good, because Odell Beckham scares me for so many other players. I'm not used to seeing players be that good, drop off a cliff for no reason. And he scares me. It's the same. That's why I'm scared of my Juju take, but his ADP is so low right now. I don't have to care. So it can happen, but I would still rather take a bet on Odell Beckham than most, rookie profiles, frankly, because doing it is so much more difficult than showing you maybe have the potential from college, or because you're going into year 2 or whatever weak kind of arguments. And so I still find a lot of edge in remembering who is good. But in an inverse one of that, I saw it on Twitter the other day, and I was like, that's a good point. Because I've been drafting a lot of James Conner, Philip Lindsay in best ball. Because when I need later running backs, I'm looking for a floor as well as a ceiling, so I don't die the first few weeks. And I need a few usable weeks here and there. And so James Conner, Lindsay, they're kind of filling that gap until hopefully some of those others blow up or produce more usable weeks. And but the tweet I saw, and I can't remember who made it, but they were saying if it's James Conner this year, he's James Conner, which is decent, to be fair. Those usable weeks is kind of what I'm banking on, at least for the first part of the season. But if it's Chase Edmonds, and Chase Edmonds has to be much better than that. And I thought that was an interesting way of thinking of it. It's good to search for flaws. Like, again, if you're getting James Conner as late as we're getting him, then it's worth it. But if you're looking for an upside, then it's Chase Edmonds. I think it's less likely to be Chase Edmonds for the majority of the season. But if he breaks through, gets that job, then it could be much better than we're expecting. And I think that's an interesting logic to apply to things, where if the opposite of what we think is going to happens, there's more upside there. If you see that as a second edge, one, remember who's good, and two, if the inverse is true, does that mean there's more upside going for the other guy? And that's actually the better way of saying that I usually say is we don't want points, we want more points than we pay for. So you don't want to draft James Robinson, you want to draft James Robinson for free. That's where you win the league with him. And it's good to get Cam Akers in the first round this year. And I shouldn't use Cam Akers anymore because this is just sad now. And I really was looking forward to seeing him play this year. But we're getting what we're paid for at that point. So we need it. It's very valuable. But that's not league winning because you paid for it. So you tend to want more than you pay. That's how your team's significantly better than everyone else's.
Yeah, it's the difference between going and paying for a 3 Michelin star restaurant and getting your meal, or going to the all you can eat buffet, still paying that price, but getting all of the food and it is like that. That was my 0 RB success last year, which washed up on the beach in 3 championships. Thanks to Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen, but it hinged on getting James Robinson in either the 6th round of rookie drafts, because I'm a degenerate and a lot of my leagues have 6th-round rookie drafts, or getting him off the waiver wire in the preseason when we were talking about him as being a potential when Ozigbo went down and then Fournette got shipped, and it was like, well, he's the only one left. So I'm feeling good about it. I like James Robinson's profile, and now that he's got run, that's great.
There's an interesting balance to play with that one, because one of the things I've been trying to accept this offseason is that player you like probably sucks. We've been saying for so long, because it basically splits into a 50-50 split. Those who are above average in any one stat, who break out later, half of them are above that stat and half of them are below that average. It's basically a 50-50 split across most things I look at. And if you try and combine any of them, then the group gets too small. Essentially, you just have to assess them player by player. But even the market has been remarkably efficient at fading the right players because our experience of those points tends to be fairly accurate. And so any extra value you can bring with your own player evaluation or knowledge to that is probably going to improve it. So in fact, despite the fact we say we give up too soon, we probably don't give up soon enough for points that we expect to get. But if we can get discounts on those other players, that's where you get points over what you expect to get. And that's how I'm justifying Jalen Reagor this year. If I get him for a second round pick, the upside value is worth it. If I get him for a first round pick, I'm probably just overpaying for something that isn't going to happen at this point.
Right. And yeah, see, that's, man, that makes absolute sense.
Isn't it weird though? Sorry,
no, it's all good.
Because I say these things and then I immediately counter myself because I literally agree with no one. Because the other aspect of that is, if you are you've got a nose for it. And I think a lot of players just do, and they do better to not listen to fantasy football podcasts. They do better to listen to NFL ones and make up their own mind. I think we should all be doing that anyway. And also listen to my podcast, please, and Zach's, because we're out here. But like that works when you're betting on the averages and playing a market. But if you're playing in a league, which we all are, even if we're playing in 10 of them, it does no good to say that if Jalen Reagor hits this year and you just weren't willing to pay that first. So like it's true, but if it, you know what I mean? Like it's okay to be, that's why I'm constantly, if you disagree with my take on Jalen Reagor, like your experience of it was different, then completely ignore it and just be all in. Because I definitely don't out-evaluate anyone. If you know what I mean? So, like, that's all great unless you think differently. And that's where, like, I started by saying, look, there is no fun in fantasy football to be had with listening to other people. Like, please listen to me. But if you win by listening to me, it doesn't feel as good. And if you lose by listening to me, it definitely feels worse than losing because you made your own decision. And that's always worth paying attention to. Like, what I just said about Reagor is true. But if he hits and you paid a first, you ain't going to be crying.
Right. And that's, yeah. And that's, I think sometimes we lose the fun. Like this is supposed to be fun. All of this is supposed to be fun. Podcasting about fantasy football is supposed to be fun. Playing fantasy football is supposed to be fun. And if you boil it down and all of a sudden make it a job or make it so clinical that you take all the fun out of it, you're missing the boat. I have a question about the difference, because there is a difference in your process when you're looking at rookies coming into the league versus looking at veterans, because veterans, obviously you have it's in theory a fairly equal playing field. They're all in the NFL. They're all playing against similar competition. Rookies coming in, that's not the case. How is it different for you to find edges in evaluating rookies than it is the veterans?
Good question. There's a lot there as well. Let me see. I'm trying to get better at sophomore evaluation. And by sophomore, I mean it more generally by next year evaluation. Like I was just talking about my player evaluation or the lack of individual player evaluation seasonal data can do. In my opinion, if you really want to dig into it, because all splits in that level just failed. They just failed. Tyler Higbee happened. Sorry, guys, I was right. But let's just start at the beginning. NFL stats are worth twice whatever rookie stats are worth to you. That's my loose correlation. Like Jalen Reagor had like an A+ profile. I just completely whiffed. He's going to be in a bust video, I assume, after he busts next year for me. That's where I'm at. I'll be digging back through his stats, trying to figure out what was lying to me. Was he just in such a good offense? Was he Canadian? I don't know. Because I've missed it entirely if this happens, and it looks like it's going to happen, because his NFL stats are worth twice what they are. And his NFL stats were below average. Again, half the players who hit have below average stats. But looking at the experience in ADP and then looking at the per game performance, like I could see why. Like it's not like Jalen Reagor did a Cam Akers, so he's below average, but he was really only playing that role at the end of the season. Because wide receiver is a little different. If you don't earn that role earlier, that's on you. With running back, you're allowed to say, well, Cam Akers couldn't earn he has to be given it to a certain extent more than wide receiver. So Michael Pittman, you'll be happy to know, kind of did that better than Jalen Reagor last year. And he's slightly higher in Reagor and ADP, which to me feels crazy because they both had the same target share seasonal long. But when you look at the actual performance of it, Reagor missed the first half of the season. Split stats don't work. And the minute Pittman was on the field, who's getting those 20, 18% target shares per game. Reagor did that, but only towards the latter half of the season, and splits don't work. So it's actually a fair assessment, and the market's kind of doing that for me, so I didn't have to do that damn work. But, yeah, so that's part of it. Just the fact that stats are below average and the market, and also when you dig into the season and really do the history of it and recognize that being injured or missing part a wide receiver, I'm starting to believe, honestly, truly, that a lot of high drafted wide receivers injuries aren't injuries. And I don't have the kudos or the background to back that up, but there's no way that if you miss part of a season because of injuries, that means you're bad. That has nothing to do with your talent. So why do pretty much all of them who miss time with injuries turn out to be bad afterwards, despite they should be getting opportunities? And Jalen Reagor was still getting 15-20% target share per game after he finally got on the field. Like, maybe that was just because he honestly was missing time, and all the ones in the past were actually faux injuries. But I definitely won't know that, and so splits don't work, and it sucks. But if I get the discount, I'm going in because of that rookie profile. So that's the start of it. Like, the NFL stats are just worth more value. They have more predictive value. Like, they have some predictive value, which is something. I recently developed what I'm calling a sophomore model to try and project points per game the following year, really concentrating on that second year, but it's meant to work for others as well. And that's part of the process of getting better at player evaluation, where I'm merging together their per game performances in order to try and spit something like that out. But I mean, that's the basis of all of it. I've been mostly listening to the market, but I'm trying to get better at doing my own evaluation. Where I don't watch any of this, Zach. I'm surprised to hear they actually play these games. I thought the stats were simulated in the computer somewhere. Like, why play them out? People can honestly get hurt playing this game. What's with that? That seems dangerous. Yeah, it was mostly fictional to me. I'm really just reading the market for how we experience them. Like the stat I spat out, but that's only since 2013 and 14. DLF ADP has been like 94% of the time we fade a player by a round, even just a round in ADP. They fail to have any fantasy significant seasons after that. And that's the highest hit rate I can find in anything. Above the fold, so if we increase them, it's about a 50-50 bet. So it's not like we get it all right up the top. But if our experience of that rookie year is so bad we start fading them, then it's pretty much a hit rate. Now, we have 1 month, guys, and you have literally 1 month to raise Jerry Jeudy's ADP before you get another one wrong, in my opinion, because there are some market inefficiencies still there. Like Tyler Boyd, you all took crazy pills after that rookie season, apparently, and faded him 10 rounds. And how you feeling right now? Like, let's not do the same with Jerry Jeudy.
People hate slot receivers, Peter. They hate them.
Oh, you said that, and I was going to bring it back up because I was literally just reading another piece and trying to prove that high rate targets are more valuable because, like, fucking duh, you think you're proven anyway. But yeah, it has been a trend that high-scoring wide receivers are increasingly slot, and the value of it was you noticed it before. It was really a trend, and that's how you capitalize. But what was I thinking? There's also like a recent trend I've been noticing is that more than I've ever seen before, and granted, I'm not a million years old. I am a million years old, but I definitely haven't been looking at data forever. Like, good wide receivers are changing ADOTs. And I don't know if I just haven't looked for it enough, or if that's a new thing. And that could have a negative effect on talking about higher ADOTs have more value in their targets, because that's true. And also affect that slot value too, because Juju was one. Robbie Anderson was one in the opposite way, in that his ADOT dropped. He got more of those valuable slot targets. And so, like, it might make some of these results a little bit more random if the NFL is starting to shift wide receivers around more than they traditionally have. Because traditionally, ADOT's been so sticky, right, that we've considered a function of the player. But I think, again, it's too early to say it's happening, and it might just be a few players, but that's kind of why I like it too. Like Robbie Anderson, Juju Smith-Schuster, Even Deontay Johnson on the same team, interestingly enough. Mike Evans came down. Chris Godwin came up. I mean, it might not be a thing, but just there's almost too many of them to think it couldn't not be a trend. And if we're noticing it now, that's interesting. The ramifications of it aren't as easy to read as if slot targets are more valuable, they're more valuable. Because literally it made Juju less valuable and Robbie Anderson more valuable moving in off the same direction. But it is something worth noting, right?
And I think and again, this is me hypothesizing without any stats or anything to back it up with. I have no data, but I think that's
up. Don't worry about it.
That's how I operate. I swashbuckle and then I go, oh, Peter, can you figure out why this happens? But like, to me, my hypothesis on this is, you're seeing finally NFL coaches and coaching staffs looking at their good players, their players who should be producing, and trying to move them around into places where they can succeed and they can exploit matchups, which, for the longest time it was, somebody who the community deemed unworthy. So like somebody like Jarvis Landry, who got slid into the slot, and they're like, he's a bad receiver, he's just a slot. And he's reaping the benefits of getting these great matchups and being able to catch, 100 or 110 or 115 passes. And maybe he doesn't get the ADOT, but it's PPR. So even though you're giving up the yards down the field, you're gaining the points for the reception. Now I think you're seeing NFL coaches go, they almost treated slot receivers like the kid that plays right field in Little League. They're like, hey, you're terrible. Go out here where you can't hurt us too badly. But now all of a sudden you're realizing that slot and moving guys around. And if you've got cornerbacks who play half the field. So you had Richard Sherman, who all he did was shadow one half of the field. If you start moving your receivers around and playing matchups, you can actually exploit defensive tendencies and gain advantages for your players who should be producing more for you. And you just turn them up instead of them having to beat the best coverage or, double coverage. All of a sudden you can run them through the middle of the field and maybe get them matched up on a linebacker or end up in a zone where they can actually do something and have yards after the catch. And this is a new thing. And I think part of this is analytics driven. I think part of this is
because analytics is growing in some teams, and the other ones are going to keep being bad.
Yes,
by the way.
Yes, and to me, that's the thing where, and it's why I keep my ears open for, in fantasy football, the analytics. So listening to you and listening to JJ Zacharyson and listening to Dave Wright and all of these people who look at things from the perspective of numbers, because again, I watch the games. I watch collegiate players. I watch rookies come in. I watch the games on Sunday, but I can't see everything. And even though I'm watching, I don't get the picture necessarily that the numbers do unless I'm doing my rookie evaluation, where I'm watching a guy 10 or 12 or 15 times. If I'm just watching games on Sunday, there's so much noise in what's going on that I need that analytics. And I think the NFL is starting to realize that too.
Yeah, I think we used to think about this in terms of Percy Harvin players. Who's going to get rushing attempts to be that hybrid player? When in fact, I think it's spitting out with, like you're saying, they're moving players around much more than giving them this hybrid role. They're who can take running back targets?
Right.
Now, interesting, I can't find a pattern or causation to it. For example, Robbie Anderson dropped his ADP and cut DJ Moore for most of the season, but there is no way of reading DJ Moore's stats to suggest that it's because he was a worse player. DJ Moore's been amazing on a per touch, per snap, any basis you care to mention. But they clearly wanted to give some of that to Robbie Anderson, even though he's always been a further down the target player. Whereas Juju Smith-Schuster, I thought I'd found something in that's a player who can get you something where you normally get nothing, so you stuff him. Just stuff your best wide receiver there, he'll make something out of nothing. That's what I think I saw happen. But like, it's hard to say that since I haven't seen Claypool play more, and Deontay Johnson's been decent wherever he's been put, even though he had a slightly lower ADOT as well. It could have been a function of Ben's arm. So even in the few instances I can think of, I can't find cause and therefore a way to say in these congested situations someone's going to get moved and therefore they're the valuable player, or these are the guys that I can't find the causation.
And so here from the film watching perspective, a lot of those teams that are moving players not only are can we credit the coaches, but also the quarterbacks are not guys who can throw the ball down the field anymore. You saw in Pittsburgh, Roethlisberger's arm, he shot putting the ball 8 yards down the field, and that was like fantastic. In Carolina last year, last year you saw Teddy Bridgewater in Carolina. Bridgewater is not exactly known for, he doesn't have a Michael Bishop arm. He can't throw it 85 yards in the air. And even in Tampa, where Tom Brady is, his deep ball has been over the last few years, I would say, less than stellar. Being a Pats fan, having watched it, he's been fine, but he doesn't have that like go over the top to Randy Moss, go over the top to Chris Hogan like he used to. He's started to work a lot closer and a lot quicker. And so you saw at the beginning of the year, you saw Mike Evans. I mean, he would have games where he would have 3 catches for 4 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is completely, different from what Mike Evans has. And you saw, Godwin work maybe a little further than he normally did, but not. He wasn't. Yeah, and
interesting enough, Chris Godwin is only second on that team in terms of volume. Also, performance on that volume to Antonio Brown when he joined the team. Interesting enough, like Antonio Brown had like 7.6 targets per game. Godwin had 7, which is an incredibly high volume for both.
Remember who is good. I heard you say that. So
yeah,
that could be a steal.
Hey, you combine that with Adam Harmstead's actual research on nerding. I mean, what is the metaphor? Someone's going to flip a coin with multiple sides this season, and Antonio Brown will be Antonio Brown, or will be a pumpkin, but he can still be Antonio Brown. It's not going to slowly decrease, in other words.
No, and that's this man, Peter. I love when you come on. This has been an absolute blast of a show. I love it because you approach things from such a different angle than I do.
Well, man. I'm neither smart nor have been watching this for 20. I got to figure out my own way, and apparently it's working.
Well, that's it. But it also like your angle sparks me to go off in a whole different direction than I was, but not even the direction where you were. It's so much fun.
I have that effect on people. When I start talking, everyone's like, I hate that so much. I am going to go prove that wrong. And I'm like, yeah, that's how I started. Don't watch yourself. There's a deep well.
Yeah, no.
I'm at the end of that rainbow.
I'm closing out every single spreadsheet. I want no part of that. I will leave that to you. But that I like that for me, like this was exactly the show I was hoping for. This was the finding the edges in the Peter Howard way, because that's not how I do it. And the whole, I mean, when Kyle and I started this show, and man, this makes me feel old. So this is my 40th birthday today, and I feel older because I say Kyle and I started this show in 2015. Yeah. I feel older because of that than I do saying I'm 40. But like when Kyle and I started the show, our whole premise was most people who spout off about this don't actually know what they're talking about. They're either making educated guesses or just plain guesses. And the trick to this is realizing that you don't know and finding people who are making educated guesses and listening to them and getting better that way. And that is one of the things that I appreciate most about you from the moment that we met to now is you're always willing to say, I don't know, but you're also always willing to say, this is what I know this is how I got there, and this is what I think, and that, like, to me, that's invaluable in an analyst.
Well, most of what I've learned is I'm not finding stuff no one else does, but I can find out how much I can rely on it. If you know what I mean, that seems to be that always the missing part for me. It was like, this many players do this, or this means it. I'm like, how often does that happen? How many times does that like that? Because they can only say so much every time, and you have to build your own damn spreadsheet to track it. And so, yeah. But I've learned that I'm definitely not smarter than anyone else. I can't find anything out that anyone else doesn't know, but I can at least see how well I can rely on it. And that seems to be the heart of mine. But I was going to say, yeah, I hope to hear more of these on the Dynasty Dummies, because, like, I've got names. Like, to get TJ Hernandez on here, he answers the phone for you, I assume. I'd really like to hear him talk about how he goes about finding this kind of thing. Cooper Adams, DLF, he's someone who's growing on me. I don't like him, obviously, but I do believe he does his work. I've been reading his articles with interest. Apparently, he's one of the people I pissed off enough on Twitter that he started doing this. So I'm very happy to see him finally.
I like to think of that as inspiration, Peter.
Yeah, it was about Jalen Reagor too. So he got he's. I was victory dancing on Jalen Reagor. That feels great. But no, Cooper's really interesting as well. Dave Wright, FS Spaceman, you know him. So yeah, it'd be fascinating to hear you talk to these people.
And I hope that happens. That's my goal, is to bring on a whole bunch of people smarter than I am and ask them questions, and then just reap the benefit of them being brilliant and having ways to find edges that I don't, because I attack the psychological side of things. I attack my league mates' biases. I attack the fact that this year people are afraid of Christian McCaffrey and Saquon Barkley because they were hurt last year.
They're one of the 2 or 3 running backs I actually drafted in the first round.
Yeah, and I think this year, like, that's a huge advantage because people are afraid of them, and maybe not the sharps that you're intermingling with on Twitter all the time, but like the people in your home league, or the people if you end up in like a Yahoo league or an ESPN league, or even just a general internet league where you're not playing with a whole bunch of people who are 1,000% plugged in 24 hours a day. Like, that's a thing. There is a psychological component where George Kittle, same thing. Mm-hmm. People are afraid of George Kittle's now barely clinging to tight end 3.
I know. So, like, if you're gonna make a bet on the upside of this offense, why not just take the one you definitely know is good?
Yeah, no. but that's not how people are approaching it, because George Kittle got hurt last year, and so like
Brandon Ayuk is fancy. He's awful thick.
Debo's going to steal his bike. Don't you worry about that. Every time Deebo Samuel has been on the field, he has produced like crazy, and people don't realize it because Ayuk had like...
people hate that take, by the way. Because he's so thick, and he's so second year, and he's so huge, and he could be Calvin Johnson, but there's only one of those.
But everyone like saw Ayuk do it for like 7 games last year, and they're like, Ayuk did this for 7 games in his rookie year. I'm like, go look at Debo's rookie year. He did the exact same thing, and then he did it again when he was healthy this year. Like that, he's that guy. He's the number 2 behind Kittle. But whatever. I completely digress.
You know, the only person who knows that in your dynasty league, the guy with Deebo Samuels. I promise, because I sent him a trade offer and he said no.
I've got so much Deebo because it makes me happy.
This is actually the one reason I hate Twitter, as I've started to experiment with getting better at trades, because usually I just draft everyone, obviously, but I'm trying to get better at actionable so I'm trying to offer more trades to get a better idea of it, following Dynasty Outhouse's lead, because that's an awesome podcast, the Trade Addicts podcast, and they're teaching me stuff. But like I try to send offers, and then I'm like, damn it, I thought I was close on that one. And you get all the negative trade message back. And occasionally, hey, that was a good offer, but no. Like, what more can I do? And then I go on Twitter, and it's like, oh, I got fucking the world for the same guy today. Why don't you just do that? Like, I hate you, Twitter.
Yep.
Well, everyone on Twitter gets better deals than me. That's all I know.
It is, and that's another. I mean, that's another edge. That's another advantage, and that's one of the things that I kind of like to keep in mind is yes, you have ADP. Yes, you have everybody's collective experience, but when it comes down to it, your league is its own organism. And so you can't extrapolate ADP to your league. You can't extrapolate value to your league because so I have a guy in my home league who is a diehard Jets fan. We just finished, or actually we're not finished up the rookie draft. We're in the mid-5th round. But he took Zach Wilson, he took Michael Carter, and I had the pick before him in the first round. I had like 108 or 109. And you're damn right that I took Elijah Moore because I know I can flip him for a first plus when it comes down to it.
I paid a first right up for Elijah Moore this year. It's early second round. Gabe, you know him well from the open bar. He knew I wanted Elijah Moore. I knew he was going to take Elijah Moore in front of me. And the guy I was trying to trade with ahead of Gabe knew that too, and so I had to go ahead and pay a first. Like that's the way that works, man.
And that's it. It's knowing your league, and that's where I gain my edges, like psychologically, and then like nominally through the rookie draft and rookie evaluation. But again, I lean heavily on you. When I do that, I lean heavily on Dave Wright and the guys who are doing the numbers to supplement my film work. So I don't feel like I'm gaining that edge all on my own. But the psychological part, I feel like I attack
scares me.
But I feel like I attack that well, and maybe it's because I've spent such a long time studying people. Like I've never been part of the group. When I was growing up, when I was in school, I didn't have a clique because I was too athletic to be a nerd. I was too smart to be a jock. I didn't have any wide leg pants, so I couldn't hang out with the cool kids. So like I just was kind of my own entity, and so I spent such a long time watching people and understanding what motivates them and try to figure out what they're thinking and how they react to certain situations that I always take that with me whatever I'm doing, and it was just natural for me to apply it to fantasy football. And so that's where I make my my edges, but it's really fun to talk to people who actually do real things, do math to find edges. That's not my thing.
That's the thing. I was in a similar situation and like in high school and stuff, but again, people are different. You go two ways with that. You either spend your time observing and learning about people, or my way, which is much more the Bender of Futurama way, which is more like, well, then screw you. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to make my own club with booze and hookers. You know what? Forget the club. And so instead of observing people, I just mostly develop my own rich internal world. I made my own friends in my mind. So I know nothing about people. Psychology just scares me as a result.
Yeah, but you got your spreadsheets, like we said.
Yeah, my friends are my spreadsheets.
The spreadsheet savant, man, the man behind the numbers. My favorite analyst, my favorite numbers nerd of all time. Like, look, there are people who will point you to Zach Eason. There are people who point you to Dave Wright. There are people who point you to Hermsmeyer. No, how would those people? Mm-hmm. Peter Howard, and again, mostly because you'll tell me that this only has a 15% chance of increasing your probability. But like,
all those guys have skills. I mean, how to do it with the Excel, okay? No. They're out there writing code.
But the thing again that you do so well is make it accessible because you're not. It's not necessarily natural to you because you've had to learn how to do it. To me, that makes you a teacher. It makes it accessible. It makes you able to say, look, I did this. It sucked. This is how I did it. And this is what it says. And so to me, that's I find that invaluable. I appreciate. I'm gonna wrap this show because it's already been an hour and 20.
All of that. I don't believe any of it, but I really
Oh,
appreciate you having me on. And thanks again, man.
It's all true, but we're gonna talk after because that's what we do. And I've missed you. I haven't talked to you in weeks, but I'm gonna wrap. It's been an hour and 20. But Peter of the Dynasty Crossroads, of all of Peter Howard's tweets at PA Howdy on Twitter, man. One of my best friends in this industry. I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you telling us your secrets, helping us find edges in ways that we didn't know were possible. Was that it? You just go like,
I didn't know if I was trying to let you end it. You said I'm ending it. I mean, I was like, oh, I better shut up.
Do you want to plug something? Do you want to?
I got nothing to plug, man. Find me on Twitter at PA Howdy. I write for dynastyleaguefootball.com. Sub to YouTube. No, I really appreciate you all. And thanks very much for having me on, Zach. It's always a blast.
Oh, Peter, thank you for coming on. This was a fantastic, fun show. I appreciate everyone for riding with us, and hopefully I can kind of pull this all together and make it a series, because I think there are some really brilliant people out there. And Peter was first in line, first in mind, but there are a whole bunch of people that I'd like to bring on that think differently than I do, think differently than Peter does, and find ways to win. And I think it's valuable to kind of go through that, because that's how we learn. So again, I appreciate you listening. You can find me on Twitter at TacitAssassin13. You really should be following the DFPN network, that the only network in town, and all the guys there. We have a fantastic crew, and I say crew there. It's a fantastic family. And if you're not following everybody that's in the DFPN network, you really should be. Get out there, get on Twitter, go follow them. But this has been the Dynasty Dummies podcast. I appreciate you rolling with us. Thank you for listening.